Welcome to Great Tech Pros. I'm Wylie Blanchard, and today we're going to interview someone really amazing, Don Alava. He's an expert in integrating digital and in traditional marketing. He's been quoted as a start-to-end digital business strategist, and currently he's the Vice President of Marketing and Analytics and Technology for Universal Technical Institute, which is a national leader in technical education training. Don, I want to say thank you. I want to say welcome to our program.
Thank you, Wiley. Great to be here.
All right. So let's jump right into it. This morning, I was reading articles and going through my list of things that come to me with recent news. And one of the articles indicated that traditional marketing is a dying item. And it really indicated that there's really not any need for commercials anymore with platforms such as Netflix, which has shown that they have the ability to grow their distribution as well as their market base and not offer any commercials. And I'm curious, what's your thoughts about that?
I think it goes back to, what's best for the consumer, where can you find the consumer? So it really depends on who you're targeting. For instance, in one organization I'm aware of, they have two bases of customers, and one is in the high school and others are adult 25 plus. And what they're finding is that they can best reach their younger audience through streaming TV, such as Hulu, things like, or streaming radio, whereas their more adult audience still is available through traditional means. So it really depends on your target audience. Yes, people are still consuming things on like Netflix, but oftentimes where TV does come into play is live events, such as sporting events and things like that. So I know that some people are still a lot of people are streaming now those live events on their phone or mobile devices, but in general, you can still reach them. So in reality, what is TV? Kids growing up today view TV as something on their mobile device. But again, that goes back to who's your target audience, who's your intended audience.
Okay, so for someone like UTI, Universal Technical Institute, what does a successful marketing campaign look like for you guys?
That's interesting. If you asked me 2 years ago, it would have been how many students raised their hand and said, hey, please contact me and provide me information. But 2 years later, it's really moving the marketing KPIs closer to the revenue metrics. So it's really in student starts. Oftentimes where you have marketers who are, especially on the B2B side, in terms of, hey, you need to provide a bunch of inquiries for our sales team, or generate people in our database. Oftentimes what marketers are finding is it's relatively easy to build up your database, but it's a different story when you want to find qualified people who will become not only customers, but repeat customers who provide a strong lifetime value for the company.
So how do you define a qualified customer, that qualified individual?
Sure. Like for instance, in some marketing, you can look at it on a cost per acquisition basis. So for instance, if you are in the, like in life insurance or any type of lead generation, oftentimes the metric is cost per lead. But what we're finding between my company and other colleagues I speak to is really, it should be the cost per acquisition, because there's plenty of agencies and vendors out there that can give you a lead on a low cost per lead basis. But when you look at it on the cost per acquisition basis, it might, in other words, you may want to pay more for a lead if they're more qualified and become that customer. So your cost per acquisition is really the key metric there.
Okay. So can you help me understand cost per metric? What does that mean to me as a layman person?
Sure. It's basically, say I generated 1,000 customers and I had, say, a marketing budget of $1 million. That's your cost per acquired customer. Whereas sometimes in marketing, we oftentimes may look at the upstream metrics, like what was the cost to acquire that lead, to get that name in the database. Whereas over time, you really want to look at how much money did it take to acquire a new customer. And then on the other hand, you also look at maybe you've lost some customers over time. what's the cost to reacquire those customers as opposed to get that initial name or that initial lead or that initial phone call. You don't need to balance it out, but what marketers are finding is it's very easy to generate that lead or that phone call, but it's another thing to generate a true customer.
Okay.
And that's really where the value of analytics and metrics can help guide a customer, I mean, a marketer.
So actually, let's talk about analytics for a second, because you have extensive experience. So you've been in the market for what, 25 plus years.
Yep.
How has analytics changed how we market content to people?
Sure, it's interesting. When I first started out, the names have changed over time. There was database marketing, there was targeted marketing. Now it's it's big data, data science. But in reality, when you look at it, it's going back to what is the objective of your marketing campaign and what's the best way to measure it. And what's nice about analytics and technology is that you have more data available. When I was on the ad agency business, I got into direct marketing. And so we were measuring things based on responses to 800 numbers or how many mail coupons that people submitted and returned to us, so we could count it that way. But now with the internet, with mobile devices, you're getting that data almost instantaneously. And so whereas in a direct mail campaign, you waited for a couple of weeks to measure the campaign, now when you're in the digital space, mobile space, you can get that information right away. And that's where analytics comes in, and even data science, because humans, while we can do a lot of analytics, when you bring in data science, machine learning, they can keep up with the pace of the data that's coming in to give you an edge over your competitors. So it's really, but it all starts with what's the goal of your business and how should you best measure that? And then how do you then use the data to help get you that information and get that competitive edge over your competition who may not have quite figured out how to use their data to inform their marketing campaigns, as well as their follow-up campaigns to those who eventually become customers and you want repeat customers.
Okay, great. So as the VP of Marketing Analytics for in technology at UTI,
Yeah.
I'm sure you've learned and you've realized a lot in your career, probably had a couple aha moments that you probably didn't previously have. I'm curious, what are those aha moments that maybe you didn't have previously, or the average person maybe you haven't realized is changing the market?
Sure. I think if you are interested in pursuing out of all marketing, and you're interested in pursuing the digital marketing component of it, what you will find is that technology is constantly changing at a very fast rate. When I was on the advertising agency side, I got in very early with internet marketing, and I was on the forefront of things, but the pace of technology has continued to outstrip sometimes the capacity of us to really learn what else is new. And, I guess maybe I'm showing my age, but my children are really informing me what's the latest in terms of the social media, because things are changing, because generationally it went from Facebook to now Instagram, and now some are saying that Instagram's on its way out and there's a new platform that's coming in. And so each of those platforms have unique ways of communicating, unique target audiences within each, and how do you maintain that, especially if you have a product that's very broad in terms of reach, all ages and demographics. While you can continue to use traditional methods, some of the best methods is really the technology that they're using to communicate with them to create that community. And really, as a marketer, attending conferences and really finding out what is the latest in technology and how can that, and then you can plan for that in terms of when can I start paying attention to that in my marketing campaigns. For instance, a few years ago, all our marketing, when people were visiting our website, it was predominantly desktop. I didn't notice a sharp uptick in the number of mobile visitors. And so after looking at that, we realized everything we designed on our website was desktop centric, very wide format, a lot of big buttons and everything. But when you look at things on a mobile, it's very squished and compacted. So we started developing content that was very mobile based. And within a year, our mobile visitors grew from 20% to more than 50%. And so we had planned for that. And so we were proactive. And so that's where the aha moments is really technology is something that we want to keep pace with. So for example, the virtual reality, how will that impact marketing? Because if our target audience is mostly in that virtual space, what's the best way to interact with that? Because if they're no longer, as you said earlier, some of these target audiences are leaving live TV. And if they're spending most of their time in virtual gaming, what's the best way to reach that? How do you develop partnerships with those communities that are providing the virtual reality to your target audience?
Okay, so it's actually interesting that you say that you guys made a realization that you needed to move from that desktop view to that mobile-centric communications view. I'm currently in a space where our team, we're already mobile and we're flexible, and we're looking at how we can use not just mobile devices and as well as desktop devices, but we're looking at how can we use connected devices like those voice assistants that are out there, smart watches. I'm curious to see if that's something that you guys, that's on your bandwidth, and if you're doing something new in that space.
Well, I think, that is, one of the, that I was referencing earlier, that technology is advancing quickly and there's new ways to interact with the customer. I would say what we're still really looking at, how can we best use the mobile space? For instance, there's new technologies in terms of especially retail, where what a lot of people don't realize is that if you tend to leave your app on, there's a setting there that says allow location as long as either always on or the app can access your location when you have it on. And for most people, I noticed they never close their apps and it's always on. So as a result, there's technology there where if you do a concentrated advertising and digital marketing to a specific zip code, you can actually see how many phones got that ad, and then if they showed up to your retail space. So those are some of the things, because our company has many locations for schools. So we can see if they receive our ad and then show up to campus. And that's all through mobile technology. And so those are some of the things that are being explored. But again, there's, the rapid pace of technology with the watches and things like the connected devices. We're still really trying to see what is how can we maximize the use of the mobile technology to reach our consumer.
Yeah, so the technology is really amazing right now because, when I think about 10 years ago, you really didn't have as much information. You had it, but it wasn't really there that, you put an ad out there and then that person viewed your ad and then potentially you knew they visited your facility. And I think that's extremely powerful and is a very break into what I think of when I think of traditional marketing, where you put out content like a televised advertisement and you don't know who's getting it and you don't know if they visit your store. I'm curious to get your thoughts on, where does traditional advertisements like billboards, like televised commercials, advertised in print, where does that fit going forward when we have all of this information being marketed to us through some digital format?
Well, yeah, that's interesting because just, when it was just 3 networks at the time, that was that was the only way to communicate with people in addition to newspaper and billboards. But now that you have a proliferation, it's more, and that's really where analytics comes in, because there's so many ways to reach your target audience. Where's the best places to really, really speak with them? So some of the things that we've been doing is often what many companies do is they still look at, especially in digital marketing space, is they look at what was the last source that drove them to the website or the retail space, and they credit the sale or the conversion to that last source. But in reality, if say you're looking for cars, right, the new car, you're not necessarily going to click on an ad and then go buy the car. You may do your research. You're going to visit several websites. You may look at some blogs on, what's the latest specs on a new car. And so that customer may have engaged with you in various points. And so it's really a combination of your different marketing campaigns that really led to the conversion or the sale of the customer, say, for example, in the car. So one of the things that, in terms of analytics, you can use things like multiple regression or regression analysis. So I just concluded a regression analysis, and the general thing was no, display advertising is so expensive because it doesn't lead to a conversion. So that was stopped. Out of home or just billboards. How influential is that? So that was very minimized. So after running the regression analysis, we realized that out of home or billboard and print did have an influence on the person eventually becoming a student. So whereas if you look at it from a last source or last campaigns perspective, you would have continued to discount and minimized billboard and print. But when you use analytics, these are some of the things that'll bubble up and help you realize, oh, this is important. It's part of the customer journey. The analogy would be like, when you're at the checkout clerk and there's an end cap space and they buy that, it's like attributing the sale to the checkout clerk at a grocery store, right? That was the last source, that was the last sale. However, you did all that advertising to generate the traffic to the store. You may have put something at the end cap. You may have had a coupon. All those things contributed to someone going into the grocery store and buying the groceries. But by using a last source method, which is somewhat industry standard right now, that would be like attributing all those sales to the grocery clerk who's just really taking your order and ringing you up at the cash register.
So essentially you're saying don't count out traditional print, traditional marketing yet.
Yeah,
it definitely is part of that customer journey.
Right, so and that's allow your analytics to inform and confirm things. So, and be open to realizing that you may not, oftentimes we are not the customer, right? And so I remember one conference where we do a lot of A/B testing on our website, and they'll throw up two different web pages, and they'll ask the audience, okay, which page do you think generated more leads? So audience would raise their hand, A and B, and oftentimes the smart marketers would not choose the winning test, and that just goes to show, allow the analytics to inform you what your customer wants, how they prefer to be communicated with, as opposed to you inserting too much of yourself into the equation. Because oftentimes, unless we are truly the target audience, we need to incorporate analytics into our decision making.
All right, so make sure we're incorporating analytics in our decision making. So here's my challenge with analytics, especially from like a corporate marketer perspective, is that sometimes we're asking questions, but we're asking them in a way that hopefully lead to our desired answer. So how do you advise that marketers ask questions from analytics in a way where the desired answer is not driving the results that are coming back to us?
Sure, I think part of it is really having a good partnership with your IT department, whoever owns the data, right? Sometimes the part of the data in our company, the marketing data is owned by the marketing department, but the offline data or the student data is owned by the CRM department. There, by having a good partnership, you can join the data. So again, if I'm solely having the marketing data, I know how to optimize against visits to the website and people filling out an inquiry form. But what I was talking about earlier is let's get the metrics closer to the revenue. So I want to know the information on enrolled students and students that start. So it's really that partnership, and then working with a good business intelligence team who can take that data and put it in a format that you can analyze. Because that's really where the power is to inform you. And then really having a good business intelligence team to also ask your ad agencies, your digital ad agencies, to provide you the data so you can join the information they have with your enrollment data or your sales data. So then you can truly determine, okay, if I need to put more in paid search, paid social, if I need to put more in streaming radio, you're really measuring those based on what's in your CRM system or your customer information records, as opposed to just what's in Google Analytics or what's in your marketing automation system.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So, let's move to careers now, if you don't mind.
Sure.
When you're hiring a new marketing analytics professional, what are you looking for? What's important in the market right now?
Sure. Well, let's actually look back. If you are in digital marketing and you want to pursue that, you're actually in a very good space. I've spoken with many colleagues, and they say that there are very talented digital marketers. However, there aren't a lot of them. And I'll give an example for the Chicago market. In New York, there are quite a few digital marketers. If I needed to hire a whole new digital marketing team, it probably would take me about 60 days to find the right team. In
Wow.
Chicago, it actually took me 6 months to find the right team for digital marketing. So I think it's a great space. Now to your question about analytics, it's a little bit of a unicorn because you do want someone who knows their way around the numbers to know what's statistically significant. But you also want someone, another thing I look for is, are they curious? Because oftentimes the question we as marketers may ask is only scratching the tip of the surface. We want someone who's naturally curious to take your question and then start really digging in deeper so that they can go many layers down and say, hey, if this was your objective and this is what you're looking for, I noticed several things that were contributing to that question, and then allow them to dig deeper. And the other thing too is that they will ask the right question, and that they will challenge you on the kind of things that you are asking for. Because oftentimes what we may be asking for, the true answer to our question may be several layers down. So you want someone who isn't just an order taker or a mathematician per se, but someone who really wants to know, what are you truly seeking? Who'll want to know, okay, let's look at things from the strategic level, and how does your question fit that? Because oftentimes, from personal experience, I'll get a question from someone, and then I'll finally ask, well, what's driving your question? And then I find out that, hey, there's an executive who just was speaking to a board member, and they were asking this, but after a few probing questions, they're like, actually, I think the board member wanted this information. So the person was able to go back with what they thought they heard and what the board member actually needed. So again, it's really going back to that, when you're looking for someone, is find someone who will probe deeper as opposed to just take the first question you ask and try to solve for that question.
So that curiosity that you're looking for, and that ability to drill into questions to find that real underlying question, is that more important than the technical ability to dive into the data?
I would say so, because I've had experiences where I've had very equally talented people in terms of the number side, but one, I know if I just say here a general direction, I know I can count on her to ask the right questions to give me the right answer. Whereas the other person, I would have to literally, I almost felt like I had to program them. Like it was almost programming a computer to give me the answer I needed, because it's like, I'll ask the question and they'll literally provide me what I just asked for. So I realized, okay, and so I had to spend more time with them to get the answer that I needed, because they were essentially functioning as a computer that would do the queries for me, as opposed to the analysis. So I think that's really important when you are looking for someone, because eventually you want that person to be able to help guide the business as well, as opposed to just crunch numbers.
Okay, excellent. So on the other side of that, so that's the curiosity piece, but on the other side of that, you have the technical skills. What are those key technical skills that you may be looking for?
Sure. I think definitely a great math background. And then right now, because it's so data intensive, usually R or Python is the typical tool that a lot of the, the data scientists are using these days. And if you have any volume of data, you definitely want someone who can access the data, a good data team that can pull all the data from the different resources, including resources from externally. Because if you can combine your agency's information with your internal information, you have a lot of information there with the help of a data science that can help identify trends. And like, for example, the regression analysis, we were able to identify things that had become rules of thumb that, oh, those aren't important anymore. And when we realized, hey, they are important, it also allowed us to test new things like streaming TV, streaming radio, and also realize that is significant in reaching our younger audience. So having that data allowed the marketing team to provide business cases on why we should invest more money in streaming advertising and take it out of traditional advertising.
Okay, so I'm going to take a break right now,
Sure.
So we have a few audience members. I want to see if anyone has a question for Don. Anyone have a question for Don? So it looks like not yet. All right, so let's move forward. Insights. What are some of the insights that, on behalf of, let's say, a business entity, that one should really care about when they're really starting to get into the information from their analytics? What are those insights that I should be looking at?
I think it goes back to really what is the strategy of the business, and then layering in all the metrics. And then from there, you can work the data to identify what data do we have, will that provide the metrics? And if there's a gap, what do we need to do to obtain the data so that we have the full metrics? And I think that's really, our finance and accounting folks, they have a lot of metrics, they look at that, but we need to marry the financial metrics with the marketing metrics.
Okay, thank you. It looks like we do have a question now. Feng, feel free to ask your question, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I really love this conversation you have. Can you go a little bit deeper? Say, when you say you need to combine like CRM data, digital marketing data, can you go just a little bit more detail how that realized? Because yes, using things like Google Analytics, those are straightforward, right? But they definitely lack the granularity. They definitely lack connection to like where this information come from, which channel, what kind of references site, search site, so on. So there's definitely, as a professional, you do a lot more things than we who are just sort of a different domain, but interested in exploring digital marketing space. I really appreciate that you can give maybe a little bit more specific illustration. Sure. So I can have a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So there's a number of tools out there. Some of the keys are, having a good marketing automation tool. So Marketo, Salesforce, Pardot are some. Well, actually, they bought Pardot, but marketing automation tends to be the hub of where the information can be joined together. So oftentimes the Marketo can be joined with your CRM data, and you can also join your Google Analytics data with your marketing automation tool. And then you can also pull in your other, and oftentimes because Marketo and Salesforce tend to be industry standard, a lot of vendors that have information will have connectors already built in to allow your marketing automation software to pull in that information. And then if you have a strong business intelligence team, they can pull that information also from marketing automation tool and put it in a data warehouse where they can also then start adding in your financial information. But in general, if you're an entrepreneur or have a small company, usually a marketing automation tool, HubSpot's another one, Eloqua, that can help you join the information. That at least is a starting way to start looking at information from marketing all the way to your sales and customer information. Did that answer the question that you?
Great, yeah, that gives some very tangible example. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely.
Any other questions for Don? Okay, so Don, as a business owner, Should I have an understanding of digital marketing? Um, I'm curious about that. Do I really care as a business owner, small business owner, to really understand this thing called digital marketing? Because sometimes it's intimidating.
Oh, absolutely. Because I think digital marketing will allow you to compete in areas where they're uh, against larger organizations. It's really who is the quickest to meet the needs of the customer. And digital marketing allows that quick engagement. And then, especially marketing automation, you can start creating rules within marketing automation to be able to respond to your customer a lot quicker. And that helps give a competitive advantage. And really, it's as a smaller company, you have an advantage in terms of you're able to become more engaged with your customer directly, whether it be through social means, phone call. Whereas a larger company, they have many customers, and so the customer may get lost and lose that personal connection. But the key there, I think, is the digital marketing technology. So having knowledge in that, and I know that, uh, and I'm agnostic when it comes to digital marketing tools, but I know that HubSpot uh, has set up their systems to help the small business owner, and they really set up
Cool.
free classes and in terms of different parts of digital marketing as it relates to HubSpot. So obviously, they want you to use their tool, but they're providing free content to help you understand the different parts of digital marketing and how a marketing automation tool fits within that. So that's an example of using digital marketing there for HubSpot. They're creating free content. That free content, when people do searches, is going to show up in Google search results. You start reading that, you start educating yourself, and you become familiar with HubSpot as a marketing automation tool. So that's an example of using digital marketing as opposed to, say, going to heavily relying on trade shows or conferences, whereas a lot of people are using Google, and you can reach a lot more people even outside of your area and really truly expand your business, especially if you can conduct your business outside your immediate area.
Don, looks like we have a question through the chat.
Okay.
Neela is asking, for traditional small business, starting a new business, to follow a proven business model, what are the areas of digital and traditional marketing techniques to follow to minimize cost and to ensure a high ROI?
Sure. That's a common question for many people who are starting. And there are tools for entrepreneurs, small businesses in the digital marketing space. For a website, it's WordPress is a common one, and then HubSpot's another one. But in general, the way to do it is it depends on who your customer is, right? But it's really developing content for that website so people can find you. If you are conducting, being part of the conversation, such as getting to meet people like Wylie, so who can interview you, and like I don't have a business that I'm trying to get people to follow, but if I was a small entrepreneur who had a unique product, really getting in spaces like this and have with an audience, getting engaged in conversations in LinkedIn. So I became aware of different vendors who engaged in conversations that were already existing in LinkedIn. And so I could see all the people who were responding, and I'd see someone, and I may be going to a conference, and I'll know, hey, let's meet up at the conference. Tell me more about the technology that you have that will contribute to what I'm trying to do. So, usually there's also local conferences or groups in the area that deal with digital marketing. I think SEMA in Chicago is one of those, Chicago Interactive Marketers Association. Join that, attend their meetings, and you'll start to understand what people are using. And from there, you can do your research in terms of what you can afford at this time.
So if I'm looking to learn more and get into this market, should I start there at those networking events, or Is there other items? Are there books I should read? Or what direction should I take if I'm new and I want to start learning more?
Sure. I think one of the things you could do is a quick way is uh, look at digital conferences around digital marketing, and you don't have to actually attend. What you can do is look at who are the speakers, and then follow them on social media. Because what usually those speakers will do is they'll talk about what's the latest in digital marketing, and then you can see what they are referencing in terms of tools. For example, one of the tools for search engine optimization that people turn to is Moz. They may have changed their name. It started out as SEO Moz, became Moz. I think they may have changed their name. But I found that at a conference. One of the speakers referenced it, and so I just looked it up, and it was a great tool. If you got in at the beginning, it was relatively very inexpensive, and they do things such as whiteboard Fridays, where they'll talk about a certain topic on search engine optimization. They'll talk about it. It's free, and you can quickly learn things. So so among the SEO community, Moz was one of the common starting points for people. And I learned about that through either attending a digital marketing conference or just seeing who these conference speakers were and following them on Twitter to see what kind of tools they would reference. And then I would just look it up and see, does it apply to me? And oftentimes those tools also have free content on digital marketing. So there's a lot of ways to understand digital marketing by understand who are the key thought leaders and do they provide free information, free content on their websites or their company's websites on digital marketing.
All right, looking back in the chat, I see a question on budgeting. What's a budget for a new marketing campaign? Or maybe you can speak on what UTI or what you've done in your past. What have you seen budgeted and what's needed to start a new marketing campaign?
So what I would start with is you're looking at your financials in terms of for every sale or every customer, what's the profit you need off of that, right? So let's just say it's $1,000 sale and you want 50% profit. So that leaves you with $500, and you got to cover the cost, the general and overhead, and whatever that is, that's your acquisition cost. So let's say you only have $100 remaining after you take 50% profit on that $1,000 sale, 50% profit, cover all your costs of your business. That's really what you have left for your acquisition costs, unless you're willing. Now, if you're truly starting out, you may be willing to not take a profit to expand your business. But that's where I would start in terms of, let's say you end up with, okay, I'm left with $100 for my marketing. So if you're trying to get 1,000 customers, 1,000 times 100, that's really your marketing budget, unless you're going to get, a business loan to fund that. So what you want to look at is what is your acquisition cost per customer, and that's how you build your marketing budget. And from there, you can determine what kind of things in marketing can I do with this budget. So with a low marketing budget, it's really depending on who your target audience is networking, content on your website, participating in conversations like this, whether it be virtually in LinkedIn, so that your name or your company gets known. And then when if for those who are looking for a product like yours, they'll click on your link. So make sure that you are in LinkedIn, that your website has the information it needs for someone to reach out to you or follow up with you or direct them to your place of business. So from a bootstrapping purposes, it's really getting involved on the internet, LinkedIn, make sure you have a good website, and then a way for people to communicate with you.
So I've seen some very successful bootstrapping, what I call guerrilla tactic online marketing efforts. I believe you just stated that you are using some of that bootstrapping methods, similar to this, having real conversations with real people. Is that growing? Is that more or less valuable than pre-planned content that's there to meet a wider audience?
I think you're going to need both. But for instance, if you look at YouTube, there are people there who've made a career out of YouTube. And
Yeah,
You
it's
know, what's
excellent.
interesting is it's based around their passion, because when you're passionate about a topic, you know, you're more animated and people are drawn to that. And you know, like for instance, if we want to, some of the people that we train are for the transportation industry, and we know that there are, say, people who are very passionate about taking old cars and redoing it and remaking it, and they have quite a following. So we will reach out to the influencer and try to be part of their content. So we'll either provide some free material, but we know that more than likely our target audience is viewing this YouTuber, and so we want to be part of that. So YouTube has really become a way to reach, most people now in terms of target audience. So, and you can start out. Many of these YouTubers just started out talking about a certain topic. Uh, they would guest on other YouTubers' channels, so that way there's cross pollination, and that's how they build their channel. So it does require commitment, but oftentimes it's worth it, because really it's yourself or your company that you're speaking on behalf of, and so the more valuable the content, whatever topic you're speaking about, the more views you're going to get, and also there's something about seeing someone on YouTube. It kind of elevates your reputation, just human nature.
Yeah, so when you talk about that passion and starting and driving with that passion, um, I agree with that, and it's actually how I birthed this actual event, because I'm passionate about trying to connect people to senior technology experts like yourself, so they can get a glimpse of what it's like in your mind and where you see the market going. So hopefully they can position themselves to do something similar, essentially learning from your experience. And I think the beauty of things like YouTube and being able to have this this bottom line communication process between us is that I can get access to Don, even though Don is nowhere near me. And you live in a completely different state, and it would be very challenging for me to have gotten access to your expertise 10 years ago, or 15, or even longer than 20 years ago. But today, technology has made that a lot easier for us to do. So I'm very happy that I have this passion, and that I can connect people so they can ask questions to experts like you. Now, whether that's going to turn into something that's going to be trending on YouTube, I don't know, but I doubt that. But as long as I can connect people, I'm very, very happy about it. Um,
Just to
going
add,
back,
just to add to that, it's
okay, go ahead.
really I think for marketers, it's really um, marketers are used to communicating one way, and because technology now, especially on the younger generation, they're used to engaging with the entity, whether it be engaging with the celebrity through Instagram, or engaging with a company through a special podcast that maybe a company has, or engaging through a famous YouTuber. The audiences of today, especially the younger generation, are used to engaging. And I think that's a facet for all marketers to really incorporate. It's not just a, hey, I have a product, I have a message, here, go consume that. They're actually wanting to speak back to us. And that's really where you have to keep that in mind as you develop your marketing campaigns, to allow for that. Because once you, through that engagement, through that conversation, they tell their other friends about it. And that's really what you're hoping for, is that people will talk about your product, your organization on your behalf, where they becoming an advocate for you. And that part of that starts with through engagement with the community that you're trying to reach.
Yeah, I think the engagement piece of that is very powerful. At least it can be powerful, if it's done well. Um, can we talk about personalization?
Sure.
So in my experience, corporations have a challenge when they're not as experienced in the digital marketing space, where they're creating what I call televised or global content, marketing content for a wide audience. But in Wylie's brain, content really needs to be personalized to that specific individual and cater to them in the digital channel, through that digital channel for them in that space, which essentially means to me that if I'm communicating with if I want to sell a product, then if I'm going to go to something like Snapchat, which is what my daughters use, that I need to speak to that demographic, that teen demographic, through Snapchat, as it applies and works well on Snapchat, instead of creating like a TV ad and then pushing that out to Snapchat as well as to YouTube. I need to have various connection points through those different mediums for those different audiences. And that's where I think the market really is right now. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
I think it goes back to your who your target audience is, right? So if I think for the teen audience, yes, absolutely, those are vehicles to include as part of your marketing toolbox. But if you're, say, targeting seniors and it's related to products for their lifestyle, they may not be on Snapchat. So it's really quite understanding who your customer is. And I think that's because I'm in analytics, that's where it goes back to if the website is a key component of your marketing mix, your Google Analytics does provide information on who's visiting your website. And if you set it up right, you can see who's at least filling out a form. It'll tell you age, different demographics, location. So if you see that the primary user of your website and they're also converting on your website is 18 to 20-year-olds, that will inform you. So you can use that information to see, okay, what is the common communication vehicle that an 18 to 24-year-old is using, versus you may see that maybe your product attracts the younger audience and a much older audience. Then you can really look at how's the older audience communicating, which surprisingly has become Facebook. And so the younger generation just wanting to be in another medium where their grandparents are not communicating with them about their latest adventures.
So they're grabbing it away from things like Facebook, which is still relatively new, but the older social media tools, and finding their own path to their own new ones, which is interesting. Yeah. With that, so you're working for a technical training company, right?
Yes.
Do you market toward the older, younger demographic? What's the demographic that you market toward?
So what we find is that it's a mix of younger demographic and then up to age 35.
Okay, wow. Do you market to them differently or the same?
Well, we started out marketing very similar because it's more of it's the passion of the industry. But we're finding that as the data is informing us that we need to start, we're investigating, looking at creating two separate media plans for the younger audience versus the older audience. So we're going through the data. The early indications from our analysis is, yes, that's the correct move. And so we're going to do a series of tests to validate that before we roll it out on a larger scale. But I think that's really going back to analytics it's marketing today is not a set it and forget it. I've created a marketing plan for the quarter. I push it out, I'm done, and I start playing for the next quarter. It's actually, depending on your audience, you may need to optimize your marketing almost on a monthly, weekly, even daily basis, depending on who your audience is and how frequent the data is coming in. So we often say that here's our marketing budget and here's the line items where we've allocated our marketing. But at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, how those expenses were spent may differ drastically because we're constantly getting information, and we're going to adjust because if we see that a younger audience is now on this medium, we're certainly going to, and they've left this medium, we're going to shift the money over. So those are the kind of things that, I think the change in marketing, it's not quite a set it, forget it. And I would say that's even entering packaged goods if you're in there. You need to adjust or look at the information consistently to see if you need to make adjustments in your marketing plan.
Or so we need to continuously we have to put a process in place to actively revisit our plan to ensure that it's still on track and make any adjustments. Have you had to make adjustments in the past, and were there any like big adjustments, like you determined like this path was completely wrong and we need to make a change, or is it just smaller changes that we make over time?
Well, there was when I was with Southern New Hampshire University, it was very regional university, and so we used and we were actually testing TV. So you would think it was I was in the online degree department, and so we're one of the things we were like, let's test TV, because the audience we were seeking was in in the 30s, and so we started doing testing, and traditionally when you do a TV or like, okay, call this number, but rather than that, actually we didn't include an 800 number. We actually drove them to the website, and so we started using technology there. So that allowed us to run TV ads in different test markets, and eventually we did a national campaign. And so that's a use of analytics, but using the traditional method or traditional means. But that's really getting to know who your target audience is. So if we were targeting the younger audience, we might not have gone the TV route. But there again, we were an online entity, online degrees for Southern New Hampshire University, and we realized that our audience was still on TV. And through analytics, we were able to determine that.
Interesting. So you had to you made that change once you made that determination. Right.
Yeah.
That's
yeah. And one thing that analytics also helped was we saw that, you know what, people are getting to us not just through typing in our brand name, but they were actually searching for online MBA, online colleges, online degree. So before we rolled it out, we made sure that we optimized our website so that we were appearing in the top 3. If someone typed in online degree, online college, our university would be in the top 3 listings. Because that way, we knew that someone might just type in online degrees when they see our commercial. So we want to make sure that they see our university listed first. I don't know where it is now since I'm not there, but at the time when we were doing that, we were definitely in the top 3 for many terms that we saw people searching on after they saw our commercial. Excuse me.
Wow, it's amazing. We're almost out of time already. Any recommendations for someone who's working toward, or any additional recommendations, someone working toward getting into either digital marketing, traditional marketing, analytics for marketing data? Any key recommendations for those who are new?
Sure. I think, everything in digital marketing is, we have to just remember, it's really a tool. And the strength for anyone entering this field is to always keep the customer in mind, because especially in a large corporation where, it's very well-defined, where you might be just the paid social person or just the paid search ad marketer. You want to really always keep the customer in mind, keep the target audience in mind, because then you'll be able to work with the creative department, say, and by becoming an expert on who the customer is, that'll really help drive your digital marketing, because and it'll help keep you flexible in terms of your marketing plan, because the more information, as you get more information on your customer, you'll know, hey, we need to adjust not only the digital marketing tools, but maybe even what we say in those mediums. So for example, the language that in our ads in Snapchat may be very different from the language our creative has in Instagram. And then from there, we need to make sure that if they engage in an ad in Snapchat, that when they come to our website, that web page they're coming to uses the similar language from Snapchat. And if they're coming from Instagram, you're driving them to a page that uses similar language. Because if you're sending them to a generic homepage, then you're not really engaging with the customer. Imagine going up to in a party, and you meet someone new, and you're talking about a common passion, and then afterwards you'll like, hey, let's meet up. There's a great conference that I'm attending, and you go there, and it has nothing to do with the passion that you were talking about. It's like, wait, I thought we were talking about hiking, and you've taken me to a swimming conference. So whatever you're talking about, how you're talking about them in Snapchat, the web page you're sending them to has to match the language. And that way, and again, that's talking about engagement with the customer. And so that's what I mean by if you're going into digital marketing, I highly encourage it. It's a great field. But your tool that'll differentiate you from other digital marketers is having a strength in knowing the customer.
So knowing the customer, being able to engage with them. Additional key items that you mentioned for us was being curious, being able to drill into questions to find the underlying question that you can potentially answer through the analytics, having the ability to um, connect the dots with the consumer and understand who they are. And then there's still value in traditional marketing today, which is really good for me to know, because I don't always think that there's value in traditional marketing. But I have to listen to the data, as Don has told me. All of those are key business items that in my opinion, anyone who's engaging in active business needs to understand their ability to market their content in order to bring in new customers, but they also need to have the ability to see what the data says in order to make judgments on what to do about their marketing activities. Don, we're out of time. I want to say thank you very much for meeting with us. You've given us very valuable knowledge and really appreciate having you on, sir. Thank you.
My pleasure. And if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, your audience, feel free to do so. I'm love to engage with people. So thank you for having me.